Welcome to Koffee Talks, a Pokémon card collecting podcast with Dan Norton and David Person.
Hey everyone, how is it going? Welcome back to Koffee Talks, a Pokemon card collecting podcast. David, how has your week been?
Dan, this is a Pokemon card collecting podcast?
Allegedly, yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was on the right podcast. You know, like when you take a flight sometimes and they tell you, you're going to Oakland, but it's not Oakland in California, it's like Oakland in Michigan, and you're like, oops.
Yeah, and you're in the wrong
Yeah,
place.
I'm in the right place. Dan, I had a bad week. I had a real rough week. I'm going to start out with it. I'm going to get it out there. It's very tough to do this podcast with you today, but something happened this week that's never happened in my 20 or 25 years of being involved in the Pokemon hobby. I didn't tell you about it, Dan. I'm pretty upset. So
Okay.
I got ripped off. Dan.
You're ripped off.
Yeah. Thanks to Albert Swain in the UK. For the first time in my involvement in this wonderful hobby, I got ripped off. I sent him $630 for a rare sealed promo card. And I received back in the mail after about 2 weeks of mail time to get from UK here. I got 2 worthless stickers for my payment of $630. And sadly, I'm too much of a softie when it comes to stuff like this. So it really hurts. It hurts inside. It hurts deep down. And I'm having trouble getting it out of my mind. It's been a rough few days. So I'm trying to, justify, I'm trying to say to myself, every business has a kind of loss allowance. You can go to Amazon and you can order a bed. And if the store says the bed is able to be returned and you don't like the bed and you call Amazon, they will never take a bed back. So a lot of people are ordering beds, tell them they don't like it, they keep the beds. That's not good for Amazon's business at all. But it's a loss allowance, right? It's something they must factor into knowing so many percentage of people are going to do that. The problem, Dan, is I'm not a business, and stuff like this just continues to impact my feelings of the world today and the world that we live in, and all of the things that people do that they just are just not above board. So I'll finish this up by saying, be careful. I don't think this guy really worked me good. But if any of you in the UK area know Albert Swain, there was no return address on the package, so I don't have a way to find him. I would be very grateful if you might let me know his address. I'd like to file a claim with the Royal Mail Service. I'd also like to let some other people know, and I'd also like to let Albert know that there's a good chance I'll be visiting at some point if I can find out where he is. So again, anybody that would be worth your while, I'll make it worth your while if you can give me information on how to locate or contact Albert Swain. It's ALBS Albs on probably Instagram, I think is what I was talking to him on. And that was my week, Dan. So God, I hope yours was better than that.
Well, at the very least, we should, after this podcast, we'll get some screenshots and stuff and we should post in trade complaints so at least people are aware of him. There's some Facebook groups where you can post, warning people about stuff like this.
All right.
But yes, my week was a little bit better than yours. I've had a pretty busy weekend because it's pre-release weekend for Obsidian Flames. So I was out playing Pokemon at midnight on Friday night, and then we filmed Laura's Judge Packs, got that video up Saturday morning, and then I played another pre-release Saturday afternoon. Laura's running another one this afternoon after she's done with work. So that's been my weekend. Through the week, I guess what else have I been doing? I suppose this morning I watched a bit of the Magic Pro Tour, just watched the finals. Don't actually care to watch long Magic tournaments anymore, but I watched the finals. And then in non-card stuff, we've been watching the Saw films all week.
Well, that's good, Dan. I'm glad to hear, number one, that you're not getting any rest, because that's real good for your health. And also, I hear you don't grow much when you don't rest. Dan, it's also good to know that you've got nothing but time on your hands to play Pokemon and watch Saw 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Because Dan, all I do is spend all week depressed and then preparing for a podcast that when you're depressed, you don't want to do. So really, it's good. We seem to be on equal footing. I'm really happy about it, buddy.
We do. And you got it right. We watched the first 7 Saw films this week. We still have Jigsaw and then whatever the spin-off one was, Spiral, I think, to watch.
All right. Well, it's good to know that I wanted you to end that segment on Saw so I could have Albert Swain in my mind and picture the Saw movie with him in it.
Yeah. There's another one coming out in September, so Laura had never seen any of them, and I'd only seen up to about 6, so we're watching them all before the next one comes out. Well, that was a hell of an intro, so should we move on to some comments?
Let's do that.
Let's take a look at your comments.
Alright, we got a decent amount of comments last week. First comment was from SDC is here, just says, great video. Thanks for some positive feedback.
Positive feedback really goes a long way when you're in one of those kind of Eeyore-ish moods.
As you always are. Next up, we have Mr. Pelavakis says, I don't even know when David is joking anymore or if he's joking at all. Maybe he is just really, really annoyed. I mean, always assume that David is joking. David's never serious about anything, apart from maybe when he gets ripped off.
Yes, when I was ripped off, and I did get ripped off, I was serious about that. But Mr. Pelavakis, I don't have any idea myself, so we're just in the same room together right now, buddy.
Yeah. And if he is really annoyed about something, he'll forget about it 5 minutes later.
God, I wish that were the case. And that's probably one of the bane of mental illnesses, Dan, is I just can't, okay? I've been taking, I upped my melatonin before bed from 1 pill to 14 this week. And I'm probably going to have as many as the Saw movies going in if I can't get the guy out of my head, Albert Swain from the UK.
Yeah. I had to change my medication this month too. I haven't made the switch yet, but apparently you are not allowed to take Adderall in Japan. It is a controlled substance in Japan. So I had to get an alternate form of ADHD medication to take to Japan. And I thought, it's when we get this, let's see if this one's better. And if it's better, I'll take it all the time. It turns out my Adderall prescription for a month is 80 cents, and this new one was $80. So even if this one's better, I'll be switching back to the Adderall for next month.
Dan, you should take one for the team. You know the whole Brittany Griner situation when she was, kept in Russia for that little marijuana type or cannabis type situation. So all you had to do here was take the Adderall to Japan, get captured. Let you become one of those people that the U.S. is trying to bring back from Japan. We would have got so many more views. But no, you're not going to do that, right, Dan? You're going to change over and follow the law for your month of touring in Japan. I can't even. When do you put some effort in here, buddy?
Also, I don't think the highest priority for the US is returning people who are not even US citizens.
Dan, we should take care of that. It's just like some little bit of study and exam and possibly a little bit of cheating, that kind of stuff. It's no big deal.
Yeah, but if I become an American citizen, I have to renounce my British citizenship. And if I ever come down with a form of cancer or a deadly disease, I would like to fly back to the UK and have it treated for free. So I'm keeping that British citizenship for as long as they have the NHS.
That's fine. Everybody in this video, watch all the way through to the end now. Don't even stay past the Ferris Bueller part, because when I asked Dan the first question, I want you all to remember the 80 cents a month versus $80. He wants to get his cancer treated for free. We're going to see how that impacts his answers to the questions today.
All right, we'll all look forward to that. Next up, we have Cyber X Collection. Says, gotta say, definitely loving the new look on the podcast. Great job, Dan and Laura. And thanks again, Uncle Dave, for the giveaway. If you're all ever around Central Florida area, hit me up. I mean, I think if me and Laura are going to Florida, it will be for Disney at some point in the future, but I'll definitely let you know if we're down there.
Yeah, and I will always hit you up because my life is always on the cusp of the end. So anybody new I can meet just to give me a little happiness at that point. I think it was Alex, CyberX Collection. We're gonna make that happen.
You're definitely milking it now. And of course, thanks for saying about the nice new look CyberX Collection. I'll definitely let Laura know, or she'll hear this. She listens. She listens to this sometimes, usually when she's at work. Next, we have Gerald Rowland says, informative as always, great podcast.
Thank you, Gerald.
Next up, we have Craig, says, Dan, you've definitely done Dave dirty there by not editing all the cards in his story. Yeah, but the podcast still came out on Tuesday rather than Wednesday. He says, I bet he spent all week thinking that story up. Instead of skipping a week of the podcast while you're at Worlds, can we just let Dave ramble into the camera for an hour and see how incoherent and nonsensical it becomes by the end of it? He could do that, but he wouldn't be able to film it and put it up himself. So that's the reason I'm here, is because I have to actually get the videos ready and get them sorted to put online. If David's rambling at a camera, it might not even be turned on.
Okay, maybe that's what he meant. Maybe he just meant it doesn't need to be turned on. Do you ever think about that? But no, you're
Okay.
too worried about getting the video out on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday. Hey, let's put out an SH*T product. We don't care, but we'll get it out on a Tuesday because we're going to have those 177 people watch it anyways. Okay, Dan, I'm not playing this game with you today. I'm done. You can just move on. I'm just going to sit here and act like I don't hear a thing.
All right, Craig. Well, the week that we're having off, you can just imagine that Dave is sitting on his own in his house talking to a camera that's turned off.
Yes, and coming up with a great story that Dan won't actually run with the cards associated with it. That's what I'll be doing, Craig.
Great story. Craig also commented a second time saying, I also heavily rely on saved searches to find the cards I need, as well as using minuses to filter out cards. You can also use brackets and commas to search for multiple different cards. For example, one of my searches is Legends Awakened, and then he has it listed out in the comments. If you go read the comment, you'll see exactly how he has it listed out to do those searches, but it's brackets and then the numbers separated by commas and minus Japanese, minus PSA to search for the cards he's missing from the set in one go. It's a good tip, but I say it looks better written down, so if you want to see exactly how you need to lay that out, go check out Craig's actual comment.
Yeah, and I'll say my rebuttal to that in just a moment when you get down to another comment.
Yeah, there's another comment about it later on. Next, we have Ponga Collectibles says, yes, David, got to give yourself things, I think, in reference to you mentioning that you bought yourself presents over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and thank you to those who mentioned it to me and were, and actually acknowledged me. I know Dan didn't, but I liked my shirt a lot, and I'm just going to leave it at that, Dan.
It was a good shirt. I think I said I liked it. I'm sure I said something about it.
All right.
Or maybe you just mentioned the shirt and then you went straight into a rant about the Pokemon Center again and I just switched off for a bit.
Dan, take responsibility full through and through. You can't just keep throwing it back to me at the end of all these.
I know. All right, next comment is from Christopher. Says, definitely becoming my favorite podcast to listen to. Hope it continues for a long time. I also hope it continues for a long time.
Yeah, I really don't care, but Dan's a good friend, so I'll try to hang in for as long as I can.
Yep. Next up, we have Catch-em-all Collectibles. Says, eBay allows a handful of operators. You've got a minus to remove terms, parentheses to serve as an OR function. The asterisk serves as a wild card. So, for example, if you use champ with an asterisk, it'll give you champion, championships, champions, etc. Any string of base champ followed by characters at the end, there are more likely more, but these are my most used personally. Again, if you go and actually look at that comment, it makes a bit more sense written down than me just reading it out.
Yeah, so that's one of my favorite things about doing these podcasts. And there's not a lot, there's just a few. Well, there's not really any at all, but sometimes one will come up that makes me think, hey, good stuff. And that was Craig and Catch-em-all Collectibles talking about the eBay stuff that we brought up last podcast, because that's what a community should be about, right? That's what should be people sharing and helping each other and finding new things and making their lives a little bit more simple, efficient. So I was really pleased to see that we had sort of started a discussion that led on to something else. We'll be able to benefit from it as well, and hopefully others will that have watched the podcast. Kind of like when Nate talked about how to get rid of the ads on Bulbapedia. Yeah. So all of this is good, and I really appreciate your input for both of you guys in giving our viewers a little bit more information on how they can be more satisfied and more definitive in their eBay searches.
Yeah, it's a great skill to have and a great thing to teach everyone. So hopefully people will be able to use it more efficiently in the future. Next comment we have is from TCG Cross Collector. Says, wow, winner. Thanks for all you both do. Hope the prize gets home even though I live in Spain. Loved hearing today about the gym set, 2 of my favorites.
Yeah, so your card is actually, I hate to admit this on camera because then I'm accountable. Who wants to be accountable for anything? But I'm going to send it out tomorrow. It's all packed up. I'm going to try my $1.50 international forever mail stamp situation, which actually got to my Canadian folks last week or whatever. So good luck. We'll see if it gets there and keep me posted.
Yep. And of course, I reminded people the giveaway will be back hopefully after I get back from Worlds. We're just taking some time off for the giveaways because of filming out of order and stuff like that. Next,
I don't know really what that means. I really don't know what that means, Dan, because if you never come back from Worlds, it may mean there'll never be another giveaway. I'm just sort of thinking logically at this point. So just put that out there and, see how that feels.
Right. If something happens to me at Worlds that stops me ever returning home, I think I'll have bigger things to worry about than whether we're giving away some cards on a podcast.
Okay.
Next up, we have Shadowless Jack. Says, awesome show as always. Always appreciate the kind words, by the way.
Yes, we love Shadowless Jack, my personal bodyguard. He'd make sure that when I find the people I'm looking for, Albert Swain of the UK, Shadowless Jack will be there with me to help me handle it.
Just a couple of comments left. Next one is from, it's another new username, but it's Laura Nor 2000. So at least I can tell it's Laura this time. She says, the way I see the clocks thing, either you accept that if a clock reads 10 o'clock at 10 o'clock, it's correct, or you don't. But if you don't accept that, then you face the consequence that all clocks are liars. So stop clock is right twice a day when it reads the time that it currently is. The claim that a broken clock can never be right on the basis of simply being broken doesn't really work, because either you have to accept the above condition or set some alternate conditions for correctness of clocks. Like I said, I told you she had a philosophy degree.
Yeah, Dan, well, here's the problem I have with the entirety of that response, okay? Number one, she did not cite an actual philosopher. She decided to act like she was the philosopher. She's too far past her educational past to be able to come up with something like that without citing some kind of rationale behind it. And number two, Dan, she is your wife. So basically, she bought in for the beginning of this whole thing, just went with you. And that's fine. You know what? That's what we talked about. The last podcast was so much about the keys to a successful relationship. You guys are clearly on your way to one.
Yeah.
I congratulations on a biased opinion that suited your needs and made me feel like I wasn't hurt at all.
Thank you. I'm very happy with it.
Okay.
All right. Last comment on the video is from Lamar. It says, story time with Dave was great. I always appreciate the creativity put into the podcast. I also enjoy the top-down view used to highlight similar sets throughout the different Pokemon eras. It really makes a cohesive summary of a specific card type. Fun idea, maybe fill a binder on the podcast of new sets you get in, or just the holes you're excited to fill as you fill them. That would be terrible to do on the podcast, because David obviously just buys the sets as a whole, so it would just be slowly watching him either putting the sets into binders one at a time, or just putting a stack of binder pages into a binder. I do other videos when I'm filling in holes in my sets, so make sure you watch stuff on the channel that isn't just the podcasts. But yeah, I don't think it would work too well for a podcast.
And whether or not it's actually a binder filling holes or whatever, we will do more. I mean, a lot of cards do come in to fill holes in the collection for me, but like often, let's say they're coming through Dan. Dan's probably holding multiple cards for me right now that
nice
you guys
pile.
would be interested to see. So once they're in the hands and we can talk about them and over time, then we certainly try to talk about those new acquisitions whenever, even if we're not actually filling a hole on the camera. So I appreciate the comments and I'll give back. Lamar had some other comments that he sent to me, Dan. So let me read you some of this because I thought it was interesting. He said, "Where do you put World Championship deck cards? Do they get to count as a variant? I just assumed they would make it into the set master list since they still have the set symbol on the cards. Maybe something fun for you guys to discuss or look at. And if it depends if you want them to stay together as a deck or break them up into the different sets. Hope this podcast doesn't destroy the friendship you and Dan have, but it is entertaining." The friendship's pretty much gone, Lamar, but I appreciate that. I'm glad it's entertaining. One of the things that when you lose a friendship, you usually feel sad. I think our way of being entertaining with each other is trying to combat that sadness feeling. But Dan, what do you have as an answer for where we should put the World Championship deck cards? Most of mine remain inside of the World Championship deck sealed packages. Yeah. So I haven't made that choice yet, technically.
Well, the few that I have are still together as the 60 card decks, but they're not still sealed. The plan is if I go through and get them all, they will each go in their own binder, with one binder for each year with the 4 60 card decks. I would like to keep them as 60 card decks rather than just, one of each unique card, just because it feels a bit more special to have them together as a deck. The reason I wouldn't put them in with my regular set, as part of the master set, is down to that different back on the cards. I think that's what wow, I can't say that word. That's what the big difference is for me, is the back of the card, which is why I wouldn't put them in there. Although saying that, the Battle Academies, I still have those sealed, but my plan is just to make a binder as well for the Battle Academies, because those are a bit different. Those technically have 2 different numbers on, because they have the Battle Academy number and the original set number. But yeah, those will follow the same thing where they're just going to bind it together.
Although you could differentiate between those two things as well, Dan, right? I think the backs makes a lot of sense to separate the world's cards. And I think having the world's cards as their own cards year after year after year can be a really nice set of binders as well. But the Battle Academies have the regular backs, right? So
yeah, they do.
So in that instance, and when you're looking at, say, checklists of master sets, you're going to see the Battle Academies in there, which might be a reason, or you should see them in there, I think, which might be a reason you'd want to actually tie them into the specific sets themselves.
Yeah, when I was saying they have two numbers, I don't know if you've looked at Battle Academies yet or if you've put them into your master sets yet, but they obviously do. They have the original set logo and the set number, but on the bottom of the card will be, a silhouette of which deck they're from, and it will be numbered again from 1 to 60 for that deck. So I would personally obviously prefer to have them just with the 1 to 60 together as part of a deck, rather than, say in my Sun and Moon binder having 4 great balls with 4 different numbers on it or whatever. But definitely personal preference on that one.
Okay, so you're considering the other set number on the bottom of the card as then being its own specific set. You're sort of distinguishing between the set numbers and the actual set, correct?
Sort of, yeah. I'm basically just it's basically part of 2 different sets is how you can view it, and some people will put it with one set, some people will put it with the other. It's the same way, kind of, that we've talked a few times about these snowflake stamped promos from the Advent calendar. Those are part of 3 or 4 different sets, and those I split up. Those I have in my Diamond and Pearl series master sets. But I know a lot of people who, in a binder, like to keep those 24 cards together as being the snowflake set, even if they don't even have new numbers for that. People want to see them all together as a set in a binder. Similar with the Burger King sets that had Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum on the picture. A lot of people I see keep those together as well.
Okay, so Dan, a very inconsistent and answer an answer that shows you'd like to not distinguish between black and white. You just want to sit right in the middle of gray. So good stuff, Dan. Dan, another comment I have from Chris Ondo said, sad there wasn't a giveaway this week. So like your new shirt, I had to treat myself and just placed a little order on your website. Great podcast as always. Really enjoy it. So I have self-serving reason to bring up Chris's comment. Be aware, guys, that if you see stuff on my eBay, especially, you can go to the advanced search in eBay and you can put in seller name, just mark off seller name D person. Am I D person or D person one? I think I'm just D person on eBay. If you find stuff there, contact me directly. Just jump into my DMs, and that way I can try to save you the fees, the taxes, whatever. We can make a better deal if it's not on my website specifically and above and beyond that. So, okay. And last comment I have, Dan, is from Marston Hefner. So you guys might recognize the last name. If you were my age, you would for sure. But he said, hey, dude, you were mentioning a boxing match for press hype. Why not you and me? I think it'd be hilarious, wacky, and so fun. Then later, so that was what happened. So then later on, Marston ends up contacting me. I'm talking to him about it, whatever. And he goes, maybe we could do jujitsu, whatever. And I said, Marston, can you tell me something? What's your size and weight? And he says, David, I'm 6'5", 175. Well, guys, I'm about 5'7". I've shrunk from 5'8". I'm moving towards 5'6" rapidly. So, and actually, up to 3 weeks ago, I was certainly above 175. I can't believe I'm down that far now, but I'm moving towards 175, which is the good news. So weight class, we'd probably be perfect. But Marston could just stick his hand out with his reach advantage and basically keep me away. I couldn't get it. I would try to maybe take him down by the legs, but I'd have to find a way to crawl in under his hand and his arm and his long reach. So yeah, I appreciated the suggestion, but based on the 30-year age differential and the size differential, probably not going to happen, but at least somebody was kind enough to come out and say, hey, let's make this work. So thank you, Marston, for that and for watching our podcast.
Honestly, during that is 175 is a weight I can only dream of.
Well, you know what? I can go back up, Dan, and we can climb in the ring. We're about to sit now. You're taller than me too. Okay.
Yeah. All right, so you said that was the last of your comments?
I can't put any more in, Dan. I can't make anything else up.
All right. Well, have you got trainer deck A or trainer deck B ready?
Always ready for that.
All right.
It's time to play Trainer Deck A or Trainer Deck B.
All right. It is that section. Trainer Deck A or Trainer Deck B. David's going to give me some either or options, and I have to pick one of them. And it's. I mean, you've hopefully seen this before. Whenever you're ready, David.
Sure. Dan, you know what? We're actually on schedule for this podcast. Hard to believe. I wish I could speak faster. Once I do the rules of this, we won't be on, pace
All it
for our
took was
regular
us skipping a section today because we don't have the giveaway.
Oh, I see. Okay. All right. Well, good news, Dan. Let's skip the section. Let's skip the giveaway section every week. I want to never have to give anything away. Nothing to give away. Just, Dan, I didn't have my coffee, but I didn't have my tea, and I still it's like the ski. I can't, Dan. Okay, let me just move on. Dan, let's just start out. I'm not even giving the rules today. Dan, true or false?
True.
Dan, I didn't even ask the question. How do you know what I'm going to ask? Forget it. Dan, in or out?
In.
Now we're going back to the usual pattern.
No,
all right. By the way, Dan could give an explanation in any of this, but at this point, he's so tired from watching Saw movies, he doesn't care. Dan, question or answer?
Answer.
Isn't that funny? As all of you both know, the two of you that are watching this, all of you both know, the thing about Dan is he's not inquisitive, doesn't care at all. Dan's an answer guy. You're going to give Dan the question, he's going to give you the answer, but him trying to find out something, not an interest whatsoever. That's why I'm on the podcast.
Wow. Unbelievable. Dan. I do so much research and stuff for Pokemon all the time. People watching this have no idea how much I do. I enjoy looking for stuff, but I like finding the answer. I like having the answer to the question.
That's right.
But I'm inquisitive.
You're the answer guy. You don't care about the question. You just care about the answer. I know. Dan, you don't got to justify it. Dan, psychic or water?
Water. Because Vaporeon's a water type, and that's my favorite Pokemon.
Boy, that's great. So we're going to here's how his answers come, folks. If you haven't watched these before, go back. It's fun. He either picks Vaporeons as a rationale for whatever answer he gives or something Laura told him to pick. Yep. Dan, scared or terrified?
Scared. I like being a little bit scared sometimes. Being terrified is a bit too much.
Yeah, so here's what we'll do, guys. Let's watch all 7 Saw movies until I basically can't go to the bathroom again for a week. I'm so terrified. But let's just admit to being scared and skip out the terrified. That's fine, Dan. We know you
when I came over to your place. When I came over to your place, you put on Barbarian. That was a bit scary.
Dan, I was trying to measure whether or not you were scared or terrified, where your allegiances lied. And the thing about you is you'll never come to an extreme. You won't. You'll always be in the middle. It's black, white, and gray. And and let me just look at your hair. Let me look over here for a second. I can actually see it. Yeah, it's still in the middle. Okay, Dan, full heal energy or potion energy?
Let's go full heal energy.
He won't tell you why, guys. It's because
I was trying to think if those were real energies or not, and I don't think they are. I think they're just trainers that you've put the word energy on the end of.
No, they're actually real training things. I don't know if they're trainers or whatever, but I took the name off the cards.
Okay.
Okay, good. So, Laura, you didn't have to tell him he was wrong on that one. I was able to correct it, real time. Dan, Pokemon breeder or Pokemon trader?
Pokemon breeder, because I think that is the original version of Rare Candy, where it evolves a basic Pokemon straight into a stage 2. I think that's what that one does, and I love the original unnerfed version of Rare Candy.
All right, Laura, make sure he's correct. Also, guys, that would be basically an answer. He may or may not research it, but he likes to think that he knows the answers, and that's helpful. And breeding is something we don't talk about unless Laura's family is in the discussion and trying to push them in a certain direction with respect to childbirth.
Yeah.
Dan, scoop up or scoop down?
Scoop up. That was a good card. It's a very good card.
What about ice cream, Dan?
I can't eat it. I'm lactose intolerant. I can actually eat some ice cream. I can eat Jenny's Texas sheet cake. Is it Jenny's or Grader's? Jenny's, I think. Texas sheet cake. They do it dairy free.
You mail order Jenny's ice cream?
I don't mail order it. I go to Jenny's. They're based in Ohio. They're like, we can just drive to a Jenny's. They're really close.
Wow. Your life
there's like 5 Jenny's within a 20-30 minute drive of my house.
All right. Yeah, my only experience with Jenny's is some nice people getting me gifts from there and sending them to me every once in a while. So, all right, Dan, the boss Bill's way or Bill the boss's way?
What? Bill the Boss's Way? Was that one of them? I'm trying to remember the order you said those 4 words in.
Dan, they're the exact same thing. Never mind.
But
Dan, slow poke or even slower poke?
Oh, Laura's drawing merch as we speak, isn't she? Probably slow poke.
Dan, the thing about even slower poke is he's going to enjoy it so much more than slow poke. He's got more time to enjoy it.
Look out for our new T-shirt of Tummy Nut and even slower poke tag team or whatever we've got going on.
I have no problem with that at all. I'm going to have to change. Yeah, it might work. Dan, ridiculous or irrational?
Ridiculous.
Pretty much what this podcast is. And I know we both agree on that. Dan,
I
know you're very financially astute, so I'm going to ask you gold or silver?
Gold. Because I do think it's worth more than silver, but also it's the Pokemon game I picked out of the two.
Thank goodness for an answer that's actually based on some of your own personal experiences, Dan. Yeah. Dan, London or Paris?
Ooh. Well, they both suck. They're both just horrible cities to be in. But Paris has Disneyland, so I'll go Paris.
And Disneyland doesn't suck waiting in those lines, Dan?
No, you can get fast passes and stuff. Disney's amazing.
Fast passes make you so you don't have to wait in line anymore, Dan? Because that's not what I hear.
You still have to wait in line, but it means you have to wait in line for like 15 minutes rather than 2 hours.
Dan, is your favorite animal a sloth?
No.
Okay, I just want to check on your pace. Dan, teleportation or telemedicine?
I'll go telemedicine only because I know that teleportation would actually kill you. It does by any metric of any science fiction that actually goes into the science of how teleportation works. What it does is it makes a copy of you at the other end and then murders you. That's what teleportation does.
Well, I'm sorry, Dan. I've watched a lot of movies where you can teleport anywhere, so I don't think you're right. I don't think the whole movie industry. Why is the whole movie industry going to come up with stuff that's just completely false?
For the people watching, it looks like you appear at the other end, but what teleportation does is builds a perfect copy of you out of different atoms and then murders the original.
Well, fine. If it meant I had to be murdered so I could teleport to the UK and find Albert Swain, I would do it, Dan. All Dan, right. Geology or topology?
Geology, because, I don't know, shiny rocks are cool sometimes.
What a great answer. So simple to the point. Just so, affirmative, authoritative. Dan, Grimmsnarl or Grimsby?
Grimmsnarl. As we discussed last week, Grimsby might be worse than London or Paris as a city.
Dan, Impidimp or Wormadam?
Wormadam, I guess.
All right. But I wish you'd take care of your Impidimp, Dan. I don't like the way it looks on camera. Dan, Nidoran with a circle at the top and some bottom-looking things that make it look like a body, or Nidoran with a circle at the bottom and a right pointing upside to the upside arrow.
Right, those are the male and female symbols, right? That's not even a Pokemon thing. Those are the male and female symbols. That's just that's a real world science thing.
It doesn't mean you don't have to pick one.
Nidoran male, but I just need to know that that's what they are.
I'm not saying a thing on camera, Dan. And lastly, Dan, no. Extraordinary or legendary?
Legendary.
All right. Good job, Dan.
That was
Thanks
something.
For playing Trainer Deck A or Trainer Deck B.
Yeah.
And now for our highlighted cards of the week.
Related to the final question in Trainer Deck A or Trainer Deck B, we're looking at Legendary Collection. David, you picked this one. Why don't you start us off a little bit?
Dan, I picked this one because I always, I'm looking for something a little different. And when I think of Legendary Collection, I know nothing about it. But to me, I always think about a kind of standalone set. And I don't, you once mentioned to me, we've never talked about Legendary Collection. I remember you've talked about Call of Legends with me before, and it was kind of a set in between a bunch of other stuff, like a transition set. So when I looked at Legendary Collection, I just thought, it kind of feels like that to me. So I thought it might be good to kind of talk about it. And then when I read, I know you'll discuss all of this, but one of the things that I was most mesmerized by, you think everybody would know this. Of course, everybody knows this. I'm the one that doesn't know this, that this was the very first set with reverse hollows, I guess. So I did not have any concept of that, which was really interesting to me.
Yep, so it is the first set with reverse hollows and the first set without first edition.
Okay.
So they made the switch over. Instead of doing a first edition run, they started doing reverse hollows instead, as a way of wanting people to collect basically two full sets to have a get everything you could from the packs. It was rumored. I obviously wasn't collecting at the time that these sets came out, but from what I've heard, it was getting to the point where unlimited runs were starting to hit the shelves before first edition was hitting the shelves in some places, or all of the first edition was ending up in some areas and not in others. And to just make it easier on the distribution, they just had one type of box and switched it over. And then they added reverse hollows because they wanted to keep something extra special going with it. So a lot of people do really like this set for collecting. A lot of that is because it is the first reverse hollow set. It's one of those milestone sets within the TCG for that. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of the fireworks style reverse hollow. It's just never really appealed to me. I always prefer either the flat mirrors or the energy symbol kind of things they've got now. But a lot of people do seem to really like it.
And Dan, they didn't continue this pattern afterwards, correct?
Correct, yeah.
This fireworks one. So why would you think that with their very first attempt at this, they were so quick to move on to other types of reverse, hollow types of circumstances? I mean, they hadn't had much time, technically, you'd think, to evaluate whether or not people liked them or not.
Yeah, it may have just been that they looked at it and maybe it was an in-house thing if they just decided that they didn't like it. There is always the very real chance that the fireworks hollow was more expensive to produce than the mirror hollow. I'm sure that's how a lot of decisions get made is this cheaper, and if this is more expensive, is it actually making a notable difference or not?
When I glanced yesterday at the set, the fire, if you're calling them the fireworks hollows, so
Yeah.
they reminded me of what a lot of people focus on these days. I've never focused on it, and really some of the bigger collectors I think really don't. But this concept of swirls in a holograph.
Yeah.
Do they remind you of that at all? Do they kind of, or because they're not, they were just a part of the background. Every single card had those. They're not really as limited as a swirl might be that somebody was looking
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, people don't really look at it in terms of is there swirls and stuff on it. It's never really reminded me of it that much. I think as well the fireworks one is straight lines emanating from points all over the card rather than actual swirling textures. But yeah, because like you say, it's the same on every card. It's not like a swirl where people will see it one in every 10 cards or whatever will have one.
And how about the durability of these hollows, Dan? Any idea as far as if you were to do? I mean, obviously, I know you talk about the mirror hollows, and those are so easily scratched and
Yeah.
whatever. But do you think that from a durability standpoint, because there seems to be so much going on in these holographic cards, that it's harder to spot the imperfections?
Oh, certainly, especially compared to mirror foils or any sort of flat reverse hollow foil. It's a lot harder to see if there are tiny scratches in these, because especially if a scratch is matching up with a line on the fireworks, you'd have to get it exactly the right angle in the light, and even obviously not a really deep scratch, but a bit of a more significant scratch can still just blend into the hollow pattern, whereas on a mirror foil, it's going to stand out immediately.
And what about the edges? I know that there were certain, I think of probably them more as regular hollows, but I'm sure in reverse hollows as well. There's some of that, the hollows in the beginning, the vintage years that have kind of peeled away over the years. They have that tendency to wear. Any idea about these kind of cards and the edge type of wear? Are they pretty durable or?
I think with that, as with any card, it comes down to how well you're taking care of your cards. If you take care of them, they're not gonna wear away. It's not like you have to be really careful, especially with this set. Just like with any other holofoil card, just treating it right, and it's not going to peel off or anything.
And these hollows are ones that don't really bend. Like I think like EX Deoxys and some of those, it feels like
Yeah,
those ones would bend over time because of the type of holographic material that was used or something. But these
yeah,
ones,
it's
from
to
my
do with
experience,
humidity.
haven't done that. Humidity.
Humidity is what causes the humidity and heat changes is what causes the cards to warp. Yeah, but yeah,
But
these
it
ones
doesn't
aren't as
happen with all
bad.
of them, Dan. Right? It doesn't happen with all the sets. I mean, it's more prevalent in certain sets.
Yeah, it's more prevalent in certain sets. I mean, if you really try, basically any set that's got foils in it, if you try, you can make them warp just by changing the conditions. I mean, if you take cards like into somewhere very, very humid, unsleeved, all foils are going to start warping to some extent. But in other sets, like you mentioned, EX Deoxys, people point out as that one as being the absolute worst for warping. And yeah, that one will warp very, very easily with only very slight changes in temperature and stuff.
Dan, are you saying you want me to actually try that experiment? Because I'm willing to, but it feels like if my stuff, like my legendary collection cards, warped because I tried the humidity experiment, that I could ultimately hurt my collection. So why would you suggest I do that?
No, just take your pre-release Raichu down to Arizona or something, and we'll see what happens. Just walk around with it on your palm, unsleeved around Arizona, and we'll see how long it takes to curve up.
I would have brought it into the cage with me. Let's say I was going to fight with Logan Paul or something. He's got the illustrator, but yeah, nobody would fight with me.
Yeah.
Dan, another thing that I noticed about this set is, and maybe another reason, I guess, looking for logic behind why they would change the hollow pattern so quickly. It's really hard to read the cards with that pattern. You can't
Yeah.
see much of the text. You really have to look. Might that have been another reason?
That is probably also another significant factor in it. I don't own too much of Legendary Collection, so I knew that from looking at some of Laura's, but yeah, that didn't spring to mind immediately. It's not easy to read the text with the fireworks going off around them.
Dan, make sure you when we get to the last part of this podcast, I said it in the beginning, I'm going to say it again. Keep in mind that you don't own much of anything, and most of it's in Laura's binders and stuff, and then we'll talk about it when we get there, okay?
All right.
All right. Dan, what else can you tell me about Legendary?
Well, I mean, the main thing to actually mention is it's a full reprint set. So there's no new cards in it. All of the cards are reprints from base to Team Rocket. But it came out quite a significant time after it. So it came out between Neo Destiny and Expedition. So it was well into the Gen 2 era that it was reprinting some of these earlier sets. It functions sort of like base set 3, basically. You know, we have base set and then base set 2, but this was a lot more loved even then than base set 2 was. Base set 2, on all accounts, nearly killed the game, speaking to some people who were around then. Because with Wizards of the Coast running it, base set 2 obviously wasn't a Japanese set at all. It was an amalgamation of some cards from base and jungle. And the big problem was, from what I've been told, is that it came out right after Fossil. So even the sets that it was reprinting were not that old. They were maybe a year, 18 months old. But what happened was, because this was now a reprint set coming out, there were people, especially parents, who didn't really understand the trading card game that much. It made them think, this is it. You know, with their reprinting cards now, there are no more cards coming. So people would then just focus on base jungle fossil and not even pay attention to what was coming afterwards. So with base set 2, it was a huge failure at the time. Basically, it didn't do what they wanted it to. It didn't, like, people didn't treat it the way that they treat Magic. With Magic core sets at the time were reprinting just a ton of cards every year for players, but Pokemon at the time was mainly younger kids collecting, people opening their favorite Pokemon rather than the hardcore players. But Legendary Collection waited enough time before bringing these cards back in order for people to, you know, miss them and people to understand that it was a nice collection thing and give people a chance to get cards that they might have missed and had been way too long for them still to be getting. I believe there was talk at one point of it being called Base Set 3, but that was killed pretty quickly because of the negative connotations around Base Set 2, and Legendary Collection is obviously a much, much better name. They do also have a few cards in Legendary Collection that were hollow for the first time. I don't just mean the reverse hollow in the main set. The one that jumps out to me personally, of course, is Dark Vaporeon, which was a uncommon in Team Rocket, but got bumped up to a holo rare in Legendary Collection. So that was a super nice one. And also the packs were built for sealed play. So I haven't been able to open any packs personally. I've spoken to people who've opened packs, and I've seen some videos of people opening packs. They're supposed to at least be built, if the pack goes right, be built for the idea of you open a few packs and build a deck from those packs to play against someone. So it's supposed to be set up where, for example, if you get a Charizard holo, you're going to get a Charmeleon and a Charmander in the same pack. So that, you don't have that thing of, oh, well, I've got my Charizard, but I can't play it because I don't own the pre-evolutions. It's built that way. And before a lot of the prices went up, I'd always talked about wanting to do, a Legendary Collection sealed, and me and Laura tried to look at it, and it was like, oh, it's a little bit too expensive at the time. It was one where we'd have to be asking our players to pay in like $100 or something each to do Legendary Collection sealed. We didn't think our players would do that in our league at the time. And now, of course, it's hundreds of dollars for a pack. So it's way out the window for the idea of doing that. But it was set up that way from what I've been told, which is not something that they've ever done again.
That'd be fun. It'd be fun to go back and try to find somebody that actually opened a legendary box or packs or whatever, and see if we could just see on video if that was corroborating your information.
Yeah, I've seen some videos where it shows it, and then I'm sure we could find more. I've even seen some where, if you get Charizard, you get a Charmeleon and 2 Charmanders. You can get duplicate commons in the pack to help build that evolution line.
Wow, that's really neat. Very, very neat and very unique from different and other sets. Dan, one of the things that I've learned from our podcast is this concept of, all the sets come from Japan first, and then they, come here, and then they're reprinted in some way, and all those cards eventually filter here in some set or another. Can you just differentiate for me between reprint set and a set coming out of Japan that is then comes to the US? Do we have reprint sets these days, or was this just more of a vintage thing?
It was more of a vintage thing. Specifically, it was more of a Wizards of the Coast thing.
Okay, and what is the last set? What is the last set that Wizards of the Coast would have been involved with?
The last set total that Wizards was involved with was Skyridge.
And Skyridge is after Legendary?
Yeah, but the only 2 full reprint sets they did was Base Set 2 and Legendary Collection.
Okay. And reprint
nowadays,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I say nowadays we'll get reprints of cards, but there'll be a few reprints within a full set. A reprint basically means the same card has been printed in an earlier set, not reprints as in Japan had it first and then the rest of the world's getting it later. It's that the cards have been in other sets before. And, throughout all the Pokemon, especially trainer cards that are good for decks, you see them being in a lot of sets. Ultra Ball is one where it's in a ton of sets. Double Colorless Energy was in a lot of sets, but those weren't necessarily reprint sets. It was one card being reprinted into a set, but Base Set 2 and Legendary Collection were full 100% reprints.
So, you would be amazed that I don't know this, but the reason we do this podcast is because I think we're unique in that there's maybe more of the collectors out there that may, especially newer ones, that may not know every one of these things.
Yeah.
So the Charizard that everybody wants, that base set Charizard in the first edition or unlimited or whatever, it's going to be the exact same artwork in base set 2 and the exact same artwork in Legendary?
Yeah, exactly the same artwork. The only thing that differs is the set symbol and the number and the copyright information on the bottom.
Okay. Interesting. Very good. Were there variants at all in this set?
Yes, there were 3 variants. So this was the first set that introduced the idea of the theme deck variants. We've seen a lot of theme decks over the years, and before then, they wouldn't have any sort of unique card within the theme deck. But this set does. So there's 2 theme decks. There's a Lava and Turmoil, and there's no exclusive holos, as you would normally expect from later theme decks. There are just exclusive non-holos. So the Lava deck has a non-holo Charizard, and the Turmoil deck has non-holo Dark Blastoise and Dark Raichu.
Dan, with respect to the theme decks, do you think that I've always wondered this, and I know you're not going to know this answer necessarily, but maybe just speculate for a moment. Those variants coming out of the theme decks and being non-hollow, do you think that maybe they put them in non-hollow for, again, you know, cost reasons? Or do you think that actually somebody behind the scenes said, hey, we're going to have collectors out there too, and they'll be interested in these theme decks if we have some variants in there that they'll have to only get or only be able to get in a theme deck?
So this is obviously all speculation. My thought is that there was probably the idea that we want collectors to buy theme decks. We want to put something exclusive in there. And the reason they did these ones just as non-hollow is it means you just have to have one sheet. Because the way that the other theme decks work, when you have a foil, you have to print 59 cards of the deck on one sheet, and then you have to have a sheet of the foils. I think the most famous one that people have seen is the Kangaskhan Vaporeon sheet from Jungle, where half of the sheet is Kangaskhan, half of the sheet is Vaporeon, and that's because those were the two foil cards from the theme decks for that set. So while it wasn't, they weren't exclusive cards, they had to be printed in greater numbers than the other hollows because they were going in the theme decks as well as going in the packs. But when a theme deck is fully non-hollow, then you just have to print it on the one sheet. So my speculation would be that that is why they did it non-hollow, because it's cheaper, and also was then a way to test out their theory that people maybe would want theme deck exclusives.
Got it.
Interestingly, I don't believe Wizards of the Coast did any more theme deck exclusives, because none of the e-reader sets had any sort of theme deck exclusive, and then it was only once then Nintendo took over we started seeing other theme deck exclusives and the battle decks, stuff like that.
Wow. Interesting. Dan, what about box toppers? Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah. So this was the first set to introduce box toppers, and a box topper is literally what it sounds like. It's when you open a box of cards, lying on top of the packs, there's a card. For these, they are jumbo cards. They're not regular sized cards as they would be in later sets. So the last four WotC sets, which was Legendary Collection and then the 3 e-reader sets, they each had 4 different box toppers. So by opening a box, you just got one of the 4 box toppers at random. And they were jumbo versions of cards in the set. They again had that same fireworks style reverse. So it was Charizard, Dark Blastoise, Dark Raichu, and Mewtwo, I believe. And these did not have Pokemon card backs. What was actually in the back of these box toppers was a checklist for Legendary Collection. So a full list of all 110 cards from the set with the little boxes for you to check off when you got them. So they had double functions. One was being a nice box topper version of a card, and one was being an actual way of tracking how much you got of the set.
Dan, I haven't used that checklist. Should I take it out and just, mark up at the boxes to indicate that I have all the cards from the set?
Yeah, I would just take a Sharpie straight to the back of that Charizard. Just make sure you fill in every box so people know that you've got everything.
Okay. Dan, you said something about that these were the jumbos, but then later you said unlike later ones that were not jumbo box toppers or box inserts. What did I miss there? That didn't make sense to me.
So for Legendary Collection and then Expedition Aquapolis Skyridge, the WotC ones, they were these jumbo cards. So they're not as big as jumbo cards as you would think of them now inside the box sets, but they were bigger than a regular card. But then when we got to the Nintendo era, they started doing box toppers. When was the first one? It was Team Magma, Team Aqua, but it was a regular sized card on top of the packs in the box, and it was numbered as part of the set, and it was numbered as a secret rare card. And it was a totally unique card. It wasn't a reprint of another card in the set. So for Team Magma versus Team Aqua, it was Absol, which was numbered 96 out of 95, and you couldn't pull that anywhere in the pack. You could only get it as a box topper within the box.
I'm absolutely shocked. I cannot believe that I did not know that. I mean, honestly, I know there's a lot I don't know, but You're telling me if I have a complete set of Team Aqua, Team Magma, right now, that I'm going to have that card in there, and the way that person put it in there was they got it as a box topper.
Yeah, and then there was a lot of the EX era had those box toppers. It didn't make it all the way to Diamond and Pearl. It was Holland Phantoms was the final one that had a box topper.
Wow. Okay. Very interesting. I guess I'd never opened. You know me. I've never opened a
Yeah.
box of any of this stuff. So that's surprising. If not, I may be made shockingly aware of another one of my many Pokemon educational deficiencies. Sorry.
A few of the box toppers that I actually own, I got by going to Toys R Us just when I was buying packs, and if they ever had to open a new box, I would just ask could I have the card that was sitting on top of it, and no one cared. They always just gave me the box topper, so that's how I got it for a few of my sets.
You and Laura are very good at asking for things and just seeing things, asking for them, and getting them. I see a good future for the two of you.
There's a saying from where I'm from. There's a saying that says "Shy Ben's getting out," which, if you would like that translated, it means that shy children get nothing. It means if you don't ask, you're not going to get. The worst they can say is no.
All right, Dan. Thank you for teaching me not only a lot about Pokemon, but a lot about your origin country customs as well.
Yeah. We have a lot. Me and Laura have quite a lot of stuff that are like GameStop promotional items, because if you just go in and say, "Are you throwing that away when you're done with it?" A lot of times with places like Target and GameStop, they're not allowed to give it to you, but they are allowed to say, "We are getting rid of it on this date at this time, and this is where the dumpster is located." Because from their employees' perspective, as long as they have taken it and put it on top of or next to the dumpster, it is no longer their liability if you go and pick it up and put it in your car immediately afterwards.
All right, Dan, if you find anybody who's still willing to do that, I'll fly in. Just let me know, okay?
Yeah. There's some good people around here.
All right. I'm glad. It's Columbus, Ohio, the home of Jenny's ice cream. So, yeah, of course.
Yeah.
I got nothing else about Legendary unless you do, Dan. Good. Really great discussion. Loved it. Very educational. Learned a ton. I'm glad I picked it, and I'm glad you gave me not the questions, but the answers.
Oh, good. David has a rant coming on.
So that was a good discussion about Legendary Collection. It was nice, well thought out question answer section, very informative. And now, just to be the absolute other end of the spectrum, other side of the coin, David, have a rant for a couple of minutes. I'm going to play on my phone.
Dan, when you say well thought out, very informative, highlighted card section, isn't that tooting your own horn just a little bit too much? And
yes,
you know what?
amazing.
You think I might lead right into the rant because of that, but I want people to feel good. So if Dan feels good, guys, because he realizes he really did his research and he's got all this knowledge base and he can share it with all of us, including me, let's let him feel that for a minute, all right? Thank you for all being good friends to Dan Norton. All right, so here's the deal. When you're having a bad week like I am because you got ripped off for the first time ever, and you want to do a rant, you're like, should I do something on anger and that kind of stuff? I didn't want to. I just didn't want to, okay? In fact, I don't even want to do a rant at all. I want to rant about how much I don't want to do a rant, but I decided to come up with something because why not? Why shouldn't I come up with something just to make it interesting for about 2.5 minutes, all right? So today I'm going to rant on the GOAT, G-O-A-T. You guys know what that means, right? The greatest of all time. Well, I'm reading my Facebook stuff and I'm reading this post and I'm reading that. And there's always somebody out there and they see somebody post something, they go, GOAT. He's the GOAT. That Skyridge box is posted by the GOAT. Guys, what does it mean to be the GOAT? Does it mean the number of cards you have? Is it the value of your cards? Are they sealed boxes, slabbed cards that are only tens, unique items, warehouses full of items, money spent on your purchase? I spent $120,000 on this. Everybody take a look at me, okay? Is it who displays their stuff the most? Is it, and by the way, who decides? Who decides? Who even cares who the GOAT is or if there is a GOAT or anything? So I can tell you this, even if you don't care about the GOAT is, somebody who's posting and says they think that person is the GOAT or their collection is the GOAT's collection, they think it matters. And so guess what it does? It leads our posters to do it over and over again. Today, everything in this world, in this social media world, is all about the biggest, the best, the most followers, everyone looking to do the next most bold and unprecedented thing they can do to attract attention. What's interesting, though, is you can only take your clothes off so many times before your fans or viewers have seen it all. And then there's clickbait, the poster's way of making it seem like you haven't seen it all. Heck, you know what? this week in one of his posts, Laura made Dan do it. So what's really sad is the audience eats this stuff up and watches over and over again. Because in a world where you are valued, and in fact graded, no pun intended, and more highly respected based on someone watching you for a few minutes, celebrities will do anything to get and maintain those views. So who's the Pokemon collecting GOAT? And should there even be such a designation? Did they train for years, set scoring records, hit a bunch of game-winning shots? Or did they just buy a bunch of stuff everyone else wishes they could own? Because in my opinion, I don't think that jealousy should be over what someone else owns should be the reason that somebody is considered the GOAT. And let me let you in on a little secret. There are no such thing as the GOAT when it comes to Pokemon collectors. Maybe when it comes to Pokemon characters, like Pikachu and Charizard, because they have proven how sought after they are year after year over time. So don't let yourself be drawn into that herd mentality. Like I've got to do it the same way everybody else does it, and then be led down a ridiculous path. Instead, be your own leader. And you realize there doesn't have to be a GOAT of everything. You know what? Let's think about it. Should there be a GOAT of constipation, a GOAT of snoring, a GOAT of drooling? Because if there's a GOAT of those things, count me in. You don't think we all have our favorite in every field, sports, entertainment, Pokemon? Just by virtue of those biases, a lot of people will call the favorites the GOAT. But my message is simple. Put away all the competition because you don't need it. Just enjoy whatever it is you're watching, following, wishing. It's a lot more refreshing and real that way. That's all I got to say about that.
That's all you got? All right. So for anyone wondering, the dead thumping noise that continues during David's rants is when David gets animated, he bangs his hand on his desk, and yes, it's really irritating, and no, I can't edit around it.
I'm not going to apologize for being me, Dan. Sometimes I'm not in control of my emotions all the time. Do you understand that, psychoanalysis has only led me to find deeper problems within myself? And at least I can relate to our audience, Dan. We're all sick together. Love you guys.
Brilliant.
What cards have our hosts found today?
All right, we're through the rant and out the other side, and it's time for us both to show off a card from our collection. I'm going to go first as always, because who knows what David's going to do with it.
Well, I can go first. Let me go first, Dan.
All right, you can go first.
I'll go first because you said through the rant and out the other side, and that made me feel like, remember that I'm the GOAT of constipation, which means it never really comes out the other side, Dan. And also, guys, I want to apologize. I don't realize I'm that angry, and I'm pounding on the desk when I'm getting ranting. So I didn't know, and until you don't know you have a problem until you can admit it or somebody tells you have one. My wife tells me I have a lot of problems. None of it's pounding on a desk. Mine are usually, things I say or do that don't meet her expectations. But Dan, so let me just move on at this point. Tell you what I found. I found a card, Dan, and dealing with my anger this week over Albert Swain and how he ripped me off for the first time in the UK. I'm gonna say it over and over his game. I found a couple of cards that I would like to share with you. Not just one, but two. They'll be up on the screen. And this week I actually went looking for certain cards because of my anger. So I chose Hunting Gloves, 142 of 172, and Magma Basin, that was one by the first. Let me start again, guys. 142 of 172 and Magma Basin 144 of 172 from Brilliant Stars. I got to calm down. I really get amped up. It doesn't take a genius to know what these cards represent to me, but just to make my feelings perfectly clear, picture me in the UK on a hunting trip, wearing my hunting gloves and paying a visit to a criminal named Albert Swain. I'd love to personally escort him to the Magma Basin with its resemblance to hell, a place where he deserves to spend the rest of his miserable life. And that's my cards this week.
The Magma Basin in the UK.
Yes, Dan.
You have to punch him across a few continents to get him into a magma basin, let me tell you.
Don't you start that continent stuff again. I'm not playing that fifth grade smarter than a stuff, okay? Because I don't know what a continent is, and I'll never be on another one than I'm on. So good luck to you.
My card for this week, I'm picking Bonsly from the new set from Obsidian Flames. I did pull one during my pre-release, and the reason I'm picking
this is Bonsly, the company that does the hair regrowth, Dan. Is this a Bonsly card? Like I can get my hair regrown if I go to them and they do the hair plugs?
I've never heard of them.
Okay, go ahead. How do you spell your Bonsly, Dan?
Bonsly, Bonsly. I don't think there's an E in it. Bonsly.
So this is the Japanese card based on the bonsai plant that you trim those plants down and you have to keep them perfectly tailored and manicured to make sure that they continue to grow in a way you want them to.
Sort of, yeah. It's the baby Pokemon to Sudowoodo, who was the tree from Generation 2.
Now, Sudowoodo is like shoulda woulda based on the Groot, the tree that's based on Groot from the movies. Okay, I'll just stop. Go ahead, Dan.
So the reason I'm picking this one is that this is the first card that Bonsly has got since Diamond and Pearl base set in 2007.
Let me do the math.
Yep, go on then.
16 years?
Sure.
Who woke that one up? What is it, an illustrator that came back to the company?
So the reason that Bonsly has had such a big gap, and a lot of other Pokemon did too, I think Mantike might still be waiting, or Mantike maybe got one last year or something. These are baby Pokemon. So I'm sure you know that sometimes in new generations they add extra evolutions of cards. Did you know that? Or extra evolutions of Pokemon?
Of course I don't know that.
So it's like, you had in the original games, you had like Rhyhorn and Rhydon, and then they add Rhyperior in a later game, so Rhydon's able to evolve into something bigger still. Nope, you completely blank. So sometimes they add baby Pokemon or pre-evolutions. So the most famous probably being Pichu. It's the baby Pokemon of Pikachu. Came in Generation 2.
But when you said Pikachu wouldn't have Pichu, like it's not an actual baby birth thing. It's just like it's like a little Pikachu who's growing up.
Well, Pokemon breed via eggs, but yeah, there are ways you can make it so that the egg gives you a Pichu rather than a Pikachu. But they're called baby Pokemon. They're basically so Pichu can evolve into Pikachu.
Okay, Dan, we are not rated. I just want to say, please, let's leave all the birthing and the egg stuff out in case there are kids watching. Okay.
All right. But it's not a problem within the video games because you don't always have to catch basic Pokemon in the wild. You can catch Stage 2, you can catch fully evolved Pokemon in the wild in certain areas. But within the card game, you have to start out with the basic Pokemon and evolve them up. But the problem there is that Pikachu, for example, is a basic Pokemon, but Pichu also needs to be a basic Pokemon. And they can't just suddenly make all Pikachu Stage 1 because it would completely screw up all the mechanics of the TCG with how it interacts with different Pikachu cards. It would mean that only certain Pikachu cards could evolve into Raichu, or certain Pikachus couldn't evolve into certain Raichus. It would create a problem. So they've done stuff in the past with the babies, where they've given them either they just can't evolve, or they've given them special powers that lets them, card mechanics that lets them evolve from a basic into a basic as long as it's the right one. But because of stuff like that, it means that baby Pokemon don't get to feature too often in the TCG. Obviously, stuff like Pichu gets a bit more of a leeway because it's a very popular Pokemon. They find more ways to make Pichu promos and stuff like that. But Bonsly was one where came in Diamond and Pearl, wasn't selected for a reappearance in Heart Gold, Soul Silver, where there were a lot of baby Pokemon there, and then they've never wanted to make baby Pokemon for a little while. So yeah, we've been waiting since then. And I think even Pokemon like Cleffa have maybe been waiting for quite a while. But Bonsly was notable because this is only the second card it's ever had, and it first had a card in 2007.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah. I hope all the baby Pokemon can get together when they all get reissued and sort of have a reunion party or something. That would be kind of fun.
Yeah, let's say a lot of them do feature from time to time, and I mentioned Cleffa. I just remembered that Cleffa was on a tag team card with Togepi and something else at the end of the Sun and Moon era, so Cleffa was at least then.
Is Cleffa a baby Pokemon?
Cleffa is a baby Pokemon. It's the baby version of Clefairy.
Is Togepi a baby Pokemon?
No. Togepi is a regular basic.
Okay, I don't like that. I don't think they should be pairing babies with adults. I think there's just too much problem in that. So I'll try to get a number for Pokemon. Maybe we can make a call.
All right. Well, somehow that was the Look What I Found section.
Any Pokemon in the news lately?
Okay, TCG in the news, or Pokemon in the news. The only thing really for me to say this week is that the new McDonald's set has been announced. It's going to be, again, a 15-card set. When you get your Happy Meal, you're going to get a booster pack with 3 non-hollows and 1 hollow in it. It looks like it's going to be similar to last year's, where not every card can be hollow. Cards are either non-hollow or hollow. You can't get them in both variants, like with the 25th. So it should not take too much effort to put this set together.
Dan, if it's not going to take too much effort to put the set together, and knowing your love of McDonald's in general, is it possible that you can eat there a tremendous number of times and see if you can build 3 sets? One for you, one for Laura, and one for me?
I'll do my best, yeah. It's not going to take like it did with the 25th anniversary set, where we bought 350 Happy Meals.
Okay, and Dan, when you're doing that, please make sure when you're building the sets, that's a different act after you're eating and all the hands are washed from all the grease from the French fries, which you eat first because they only taste good if eaten right as soon as obtained and still hot.
It will be.
Okay, good. Thanks, Dan. That's good to know. Dan, would you like me to throw in my news for the week?
Go ahead.
So Dan, and by the way, my Happy Meal tastes all the much happier when I have those cards inside it. I don't even care if the meal tastes like anything. I'm so happy eating my Happy Meal, knowing I'm going to happily get Pokemon cards, that it just makes me happy thinking about it right now, even before the set has come out. Dan, my news this week, my son sent an article to our family text chain, and it was about a gentleman named Nick Kyrgios. Do you know the name, Dan?
I don't know that name.
So Nick Kyrgios is a top-ranked, not the top-ranked, but one of the best tennis players in the world. He's from Australia.
Okay.
And he probably, at his maximum peaked out at about number 10 or 11 in the world, and maybe he's in the mid-20s right now. But he's a well-known person on the men's tennis tour. Well, this week there is a post, and there's an article, and there's a reel about him getting a Pokemon tattoo. I'm going to have Dan post pictures up here on the broadcast of it. It's unbelievable. You'll never see anything like it. It is his entire back. I saw in the picture they were doing it 7 people doing it at once, and it took them 5 hours for 7 people doing this at once to put these tattoos on his back. If you want to see it, just going to give you it's got like a thing here. It says at Gang, Ganga, Ganga Tattoo. Gangatattoo. And so you can go out there and you can actually see the reel there of them doing it, and the drawing and the doing it and all the rest of it. It's incredible. So we'll post it up. But I always love to show you guys that stuff because I think it's so remarkable that these big celebrities still continue to enjoy their childhood type of memories. And it continues to show about the flourishing and the proliferation of the hobby as a whole. So really, really neat. I might have opted, huh? Are you looking now?
Yeah, I've just pulled the picture up now.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, I know, Dan, you also have a tattoo. You finished your tattoo like on the leg or something, right?
I never actually got it finished because I was getting it done by an artist in the UK, and then I planned on getting it finished when I moved over, but never actually got around to it.
Okay. I mean,
some background
I like
elements.
Okay, I like yours because a lot of the color you have in there.
Yeah.
And this one, of course, is a little different style, but I'm a little bit jealous of all you guys with your Pokemon stuff. I really do want to do a tattoo before the end of my life. I want to do several of them, and then you ready to do it. It's not a pain thing or anything. I don't care about that. But then I read something about recently about how they believe to a certain degree through recent studies that people that have tattoos may actually have a more compromised immune system because of the tattoo work that they've had done. So I worry about it a little bit, but anyways, not relevant to the discussion because who cares about me? Good for you, Nick Kyrgios. Proud of you, man. Looks great. Congratulations. Enjoy.
And speaking of the compromised immune system, mine was compromised enough that the tattoos were never going to make a difference.
That makes good sense. Yep, I get that.
Finally, let's play a game before we go.
All right, well, that is the end of most of our regular sections. David, do you want to do your weird Ferris Bueller thing and then... Or do you not want to do it? Because you actively want everyone to stay around this week and listen to your 3 questions.
Yeah, I don't know, Dan. Let me think about it for a second. Oh, well, guys, hang around for just a little bit once you're done leaving, because I probably just need a little bit more support after my difficult week. Thank you to those of you who actually have an empathy for me and what I've gone through. I would have empathy for you. I'm sure a lot of people think, hey, David, you're big enough, you deserve it. Who cares? Or you can deal with it. No, you know what? Mental illness, for those of us that deal with this, I can't, it doesn't matter much money I don't have. My collection's worth something. I don't ever say that. I don't care. I'm not the goat of anything. So I will say to you, things hit people differently, and this one just hits me hard. So if you care about that, I care about you. Thank you very much. And I hope it never happens to you, stuff like that. Actually saw something this morning. I was thumbing through Rusty's TCA gaming stuff, and apparently he just had someone try to rip him off by returning a box. I don't really understand all this stuff, guys, but they returned a box full of nothing to him. There was a lot of discussion about that. And so he's much larger than I am and dealing with the public on a more frequent basis. I imagine this has happened to him a few times, but never feels good your first time. So yeah, let's hang around together once you guys leave and the theater's all cleaned up, and let's do our end of the podcast bit where I can at least feel much better in listening to Dan deal with my questions. Okay, you ready, Dan? Dan, I hope that you'll actually consider these questions with some I hope you'll just think about them and not just answer them off the top of your head. This is not A or B, okay? We've got to really put some sophisticated and reflective thought into these. Are you ready to go? Dan, you get a call and someone tells you they will pay you $1 million cash, no taxes due, for your Pokemon card collection. Would you take it? Dan, I knew what your answer was going to be, and this is what I deal with every day, okay? So let me give you a little background, and we'll kick into the next step of this. You automatically think your cards are worth $1 trillion, Dan, and that's fine. I watched a post, or I read a post last night where this gal, who she's fairly well known in the business, in the industry, in the hobby, she said, I'm going to be coming to Collecticon next month. I'm going to be there with King Gary. He's a great friend of mine because, again, we got to do our followers and stuff. And she said, my collection's worth $4 million and his is worth $10 million. Okay, let me tell you, if his is worth $10 million, then, go ahead and triple or quadruple that about 10 times. So, but you know what? She got her numbers out and she made everybody want to watch her and follow or whatever. And I'm just thinking, go ahead and try and sell it and see if you can get that. We'll see what happens. Here's my point. You're talking about 80 cents Adderall prescriptions versus $80 a month. And then you're talking about, other financial issues. You can't complete the legendary collection because it's like a financial. Dan, how much is enough? When can we? You're not going to complete all your sets ever, right? Until you get super, super rich one day, anyways. So why would you take $1 million and go run off and live in the sunset and enjoy your time? Start your Pokemon card collection again.
Okay, a few technical issues. David's had to jump between which computer he's using. So the reason I would not take $1 million is, one, I'd rather have the collection than have $1 million. Two, starting over, I couldn't rebuild the collection I've currently got. And just based on offers I've had on stuff, if I was actively trying to sell it, I'm not saying I could get, $1 trillion or $10 million, whatever you're saying, but I could definitely get more than $1 million if I was just trying to sell it tomorrow.
More than $1 million, Dan. This is what goes back to what I was saying, that everybody says this and that about their money and what they would get and what they would give. But, it's sort of like, well, let's see the money, right? $1 million tax free is almost like $1.5 million to a certain degree.
That's fair.
So, and it's actually all at one time without, taking years, because you're going to have some things that are easy to sell, but some things that are not, they're going to take a lot more time. So what's the, what is there a number, Dan? What do you think? Would it be, you think that there's a money tree out in the backyard, buddy?
No, I don't think there's a number. But it's just that I actively don't want to get rid of my collection.
All right, and Dan, what about if you had kids? Might it change things if you're thinking, gosh, this could fund their college education and something? I got to really look at it from that standpoint.
Potentially, but I'm not there yet. I'm not saying it's never going to happen. I'm just saying that right now there isn't a number that I would rather have that amount of money than have my collection.
Okay, forget the collection for a minute, Dan. What about $1 million you get offered tax-free for Laura? Would you do that?
Would sell Laura?
Yes.
As long as I got a no return receipt.
No, it'd be no returns.
Oh yeah.
For the other people.
Yeah. Because I'd get the $1 million and then they'd give it back after a week.
Yeah, but you can't take her back, Dan. You got to just stick. And I think that's a win-win for everybody. Dan, what about the dogs? $1 million for the dogs?
I mean, I'd want to, but I'd be overruled. She wouldn't let me.
You have to go in the right order then. You get her sold off first and then try to pick up another $1 million for the dogs. How does that work out?
I mean, what works out is it works out with me homeless because the house is in Laura's name. But I have $1 million, I can buy a house.
Okay. All right, Dan. Good. Question number 2. Dan, I watch a lot of serial killer programs. All right. So, hopefully Albert Swain of the UK will realize that. Let me tell you one of the sayings that they say. All right. They say, we expect our monsters to look like monsters. So Dan, then because the reference is that, of course, a lot of these guys look like normal people.
Yeah.
Dan, with that in mind, if you were arrested for a crime, do you think the press would refer to you as looking like a monster?
No, I'd be the guy where it's like, oh, he was such a normal guy. We never saw this coming. He was so lovely all the time.
Dan, people think that you think the people actually refer to you as lovely?
No, but that's how they always refer to the people in the press. They will say, oh, he was such a lovely guy. He never did anything. No matter who
Yes,
it
that's
is.
what I'm talking about you. I'm talking about how they're going to refer to you once you're arrested. I
Yeah,
don't care
that's
about the other people.
Yeah, that's how they're going to refer to me, because that's how they refer to everyone, whether it's true or not.
No, that's not true. It just happens to be a lot of these people really are lovely until they go on the wrong side of the track.
Oh, until they kill a load of people?
Yes.
Yeah.
Dan,
I don't know.
if you confessed to the crime, would you later recant your confession?
It would depend under what circumstance I confess to the crime.
All right.
To whether
I just recommend whatever happens, Dan, you don't have Laura testify against you.
No.
Dan, here's your final question, because if we don't get it done, we'll never get this video done because of technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Dan, will you encourage your children, or should I say, well, the children you and Laura will have because her parents are forcing you to do that, to collect Pokemon cards?
No. We'd never force our children to collect Pokemon cards. I'm sure that when they were younger, they'd have Pokemon toys and we'd show them the Pokemon cards and stuff, but we'd never force them into collecting.
But Dan, you've obviously assessed the value of your collection to be worth a tremendous amount of money. So let's say even if they don't collect, would you expect or require them to maintain the collection as a legacy to you guys? I mean, would you expect them to monetize that thing for their future even long after you're gone, like legacy?
If they didn't want to, I'd be more than happy for them selling it when I was gone.
You think that's the way you want to raise your children, Dan? You want to take some, it's so important to their parents, even the dogs, and you want to just let them off the hook that easy?
I mean, I'd be dead. Wouldn't matter to me. If me and Laura are both gone and any of our kids or any of our families don't like the card collection, sell it. It's no benefit to us once we're dead.
Dan, if Laura's parents are the ones ultimately making you guys have the kids regardless, then shouldn't they be the ones ultimately making the decisions on whether or not the kids will collect Pokemon cards, or they'll keep them as a legacy reminder of you and your wife's life?
Right, I've had this discussion with my mother before. Like, I know I'm not in perfect health, but I hope to at least outlive the generations above me.
All right, I guess I'm just saying, Dan, half a lung may mean half a lifetime, so you really got to
That's
make sure
fair.
you understand that. I mean, that may cut it to a little shorter than you expect. So,
Yeah.
all right, well, listen, I can't get into your financial pockets. I can't even get into your crazy mind. I'm just sorry that you aren't willing to sell the collection and that you might one day be arrested for a crime you didn't commit. So I'm done for today, Dan. Thanks for playing 3 questions, and
Yeah, that
thanks
was...
for spending another Sunday morning with me on a podcast
Yeah.
that neither one of us needed to do at all. So,
Yeah. Well, hopefully someone got something out of this. And if you enjoyed, be sure to follow us on social medias and stuff on Instagram. We're Koffee Talks Podcast now, because Instagram has been banning people with Pokemon in their name. So we're Koffee Talks Podcast. On Twitter, we're Koffee Talks Poke. TikTok, Koffee Talks Pokemon, and if you're listening to an audio-only version of this, you catch the video episodes at youtube.com/DJ Gigabyte. We will hopefully be back next week with something, even though I'm out at Worlds, but at worst, we'll be back after the World Championships. At worst, there is going to be a 3-week gap in the podcast, but we're hopefully going to have something in the middle there. And even if there's no podcast, there will still be videos coming. So be sure to subscribe to the channel and be sure to stay tuned for those.
I'm going to stay tuned, Dan, and if you never come back, I'll never podcast again. God bless you. Have fun at Worlds. Thanks to everybody for watching. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Thanks for listening to Koffee Talks with Dan Norton and David Person, featuring music by More Than Never and artwork by Laura Norton. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members. Join us again next time.
But they don't want you to.